This episode was recorded on December 5th, 2025. This week, I'm sitting down with Charleston GOP Chairman Andrew Boucher to talk about everything from SCO1 to the race for the governor's mansion. He also weighs in on national politics with the president using the military to bomb alleged drug boats and fractures within the Republican Party. We even take a stab at some college football. I'm Nick Reagan, and this is We the Palmetto. We talked to Lowcountry voters. Trump was in true campaign form. Voting is officially underway. Joe Biden spoke here in the heart of downtown.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, I've got Andrew Boucher with me. He is the chairman of the Charleston County GOP and also apparently undefeated mock debate
That's right.
coach. What is that?
Well, I do some debate training as part of my professional life, and I like to think, but I am undefeated when I mock debate some of our clients in the world of politics.
Well, I mean, I think you said earlier that you have been known to make candidates cry. I'm hoping that it won't happen today.
The most dangerous thing in politics is an overconfident candidate going into a debate.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And you really have to make sure they know that there are pitfalls out there. There are ways they can look bad. You got to jump all over their missteps and kind of break them down a little bit. And
just because we're talking about this now,
Sure.
We see a lot of local forums, sometimes debates, mostly forums, and I find that it's difficult to pick apart differences from some of these local candidates, especially when, they're all of the same party or it's a nonpartisan race. What kind of advice do you give to the people that you advise as to, how you separate yourself from the pack?
Right. I mean, we always advocate drawing broad brushstrokes, clear lines of differentiation. If you go into a debate and all you're doing is repeating the talking points and regurgitating what's on your lit piece and your mail pieces and your TV ads, that you're not moving the ball forward. Of course, it depends on if you're leading the race or if you're behind, but there are a lot of tactics that we like to use to encourage the candidates to take a big swing, depending on the different aspects of the race.
Right, for sure. Well, you've been in charge of the Charleston GOP now for about 2.5 years. Since you've taken over, how have things gone? What's the party look like right now?
It's growing. It's more active. It's more vibrant. We take a lot of pride in Carl Ritchie getting elected sheriff last year. And, we put a lot of work into making sure that happened. We've added over 1,000 people to our roles as a party. We've had the biggest summer picnics in party history, the biggest convention in party history. We have a big gala that we just got through last month, and that was new when we came in, and it's now growing every year. And we're finding good energy within the, just folks who are sort of inquirers about politics. They get to the polls and vote on election day, but they haven't really taken a step into getting more involved with a candidate or with a party. And we've focused a lot on outreach to folks who are just starting to take that first step.
Well, 2026 is coming up here in less than a month. I think campaign season obviously has already started, but it's going to kick into full gear here in the next handful of weeks, handful of months. Are you guys ready for what 2026 is going to bring?
Yeah, and the job description of a party is simple. We want to be ready the day after a primary to be almost a surrogate campaign for our nominees. So we focus a lot on unity, party building, and being prepared. We want to be able to put people out on the streets, knocking on doors, making phone calls, getting yard signs up after the primary. So we stay neutral in the primaries, we raise money, we recruit volunteers, we get people active and energized, because frankly, 2026 is going to be a bit of a mess for the first 6 months when we get into that primary season. We're going to see some ads that, make your skin crawl because they're a little bit aggressive and people they're already taking shots at each other in multiple races. And that's part of the job. And frankly, primaries tend to lead to important and honest discussions about the future of the party, what the party stands for. It's a way to bring new people in often, and it's a refresher for the party, and it's a refresher about what we think.
Well, I wonder how you navigate all of that, because obviously there are different wings of the party, and we do see, especially in the governor's race right now, just that kind of infighting. It seems like folks are taking maybe harder shots at political allies in the primary than I would suspect a party chairman would like to see. Sure. How do you navigate all that? Do you ever talk to candidates and say, maybe the messaging's a little too hard?
It takes a lot for a candidate to step over the line, but in certain situations they have, and we've reached out. But we're not the referees. We are sort of the backstop. So our job, even if they're talking about very different things and they're going after each other, we like to focus on, keeping taxes low, keeping government small, making sure parents have the final say in the education of their kids. The big picture issues that unite us all as a party, so we're ready after the primaries.
But what happens, though, if, somehow a candidate that doesn't necessarily align with what's in the platform, what you guys want to see, small government, tax cuts, things like that, what happens if they should win the primary? I don't think we're at risk of that this year by any means, but, are there any protections in place that I guess the party can't be hijacked by, say, in this case, a rhino,
Yeah, I mean, the party, running a party requires a certain amount of humility. I got elected at a convention that was based on a reorganization process. Our convention had about 700 people there. If you look at, who our nominees are, they're decided by the real party, which are the people who go to the polls on election day. So we try not to, we keep talking about the things that unite us and the big picture issues, but I never want to be in a position of substituting my opinions for the will of the primary voters. Of course, I'd prefer that we had closed primaries and registration by party, so it was guaranteed to be Republican voters choosing our nominees. But until that's changed, we do have the risk of nominees not necessarily being perfectly in line with the platform. But often, when you look back at history, the platform has changed, the party has changed, the issues have changed because there has been a sea change that came about through a primary.
Yeah, I think President Donald Trump is one of the biggest examples of that very thing. Let's talk about SC1, though, for a second, because this is a race that already has a ton of candidates, more than 10, I think, if you combine both sides, that are running for Representative Nancy Mace's seat. She's running for governor. And we're seeing some regionally big names go after that seat. What's your take in such a crowded race?
I think it's fantastic that so many, public Republican conservative public officials have stepped up. I think it's great that we have some people who are new to politics who have stepped up and I think are going to run some fantastic campaigns. You look to where we're going to be after November of 2026, and whoever wins that primary is going to win the election. And I think we're going to have a great member of Congress from the Republican Party because, if it's Jenny Honeycutt or Mark Smith or Alex Pelbath or Jay Byers or Sam McCown, the doctor's gotten in, I think they're all fantastic candidates. They all have proven track records of leadership. They're going to have to fight it out over the next 5 to 6 months. But in the end, we're going to have a tremendous nominee.
Do you think, SC1 is probably still the most competitive of districts, even though it's really not even that purple anymore. It's I would say light red. But do you think that there's going to be a Democratic candidate that can make that race competitive?
I think you'll have a lot of Democrat candidates who think they're going to make it competitive, but I don't think it's going to be competitive for the foreseeable future. I think we're going to have a strong nominee. I think they're going to have primary infighting as well. And then it becomes a matter of raising resources. And a lot of the resources you need to raise are going to be coming from around the country, from the DCCC or the NRCC or the national parties. And frankly, that's an investment game. Where do you want to play offense? Where do you want to play defense? And it's going to be challenging for a Democrat to get the funding they need to be competitive in the 1st Congressional District. And frankly, if we have a great nominee and come out of the gate strong, as we get into the general election, every day that we're strong makes it harder for the Democrat to play catch up.
Well, I think redistricting has played a role in this. SC1 was redistricted, and Democrats at least say that it's been redistricted to be more red. Clyburn's district 6 is obviously the most blue district and probably the most gerrymandered district, again, depending on how you look at things. This week, we saw a Texas judge is allowing the redistricting in Texas to move forward. California redistricted or is redistricting its districts as well. I'm just curious about how you feel about these efforts to redraw lines to effectively benefit whichever party is in power. And we do have an effort in South Carolina to redistrict 6,
Yeah, look, I think the most important thing in any district is to represent the will of the voters and try to keep communities together, try to keep sort of geographic locations and media markets together, because they have their own interests as a community. Charleston has its own interests as a wider, greater Charleston has its own interests as a community. That being said, you also want to see within a state the congressional delegation accurately reflect the state itself. And it's a balancing act, and gerrymandering is when the Democrats do it, and correct apportionment is when Republicans do it. And if you had the Democrat chair on here, he'd say the exact same thing, but the opposite.
Right. So, I mean, it kind of sounds like, and where we're getting right now is that, to the victor go the spoils.
Yeah, and it's been that way, since Eldridge Jerry created the original gerrymandered district. So,
I just wonder if we're going too far in one direction or not with the effort to get our people in office because we are in office.
You look at states like California, Illinois, and New York, and for years they have been drawing districts that absolutely silence the will and the voice of Republicans in the state. Illinois is a notorious example. Some of the districts carve up the Republican vote in such a way that the entire state outside of the Chicago and its suburbs is voiceless. And those were drawn by, the Springfield, Illinois Democrats who created those districts and silenced a bunch of people. So it's nothing new. And it is, to a certain extent, the party in power gets to draw the lines. That's how we have it in our Constitution.
Right. Well, Ralph Norman has suggested that we would do a redistricting, especially to address Clyburn's district, make it more competitive. My understanding, though, is that would also make some of the other districts more competitive. You might see more Democratic votes in SC1 or wherever else. Do you think that we need a redistricting process, or you think we're good where we are?
I generally think we're good where we are.
Sure.
I'm not against a redistricting process, but in the end, I always say it comes down to neighborhood by neighborhood, door to door.
Sure.
And if you're not willing to go out and make your case to, block by block to the people because, you're patting yourself on the back because you have a safe district or you think something is unwinnable, so you skip out on it. Districts change, states change, and any party, any candidate makes a mistake when they write off something or think it's a lock because they change more than we realize over the years. And if you're not prepared because you've ignored a district for too long or you've ignored a neighborhood for too long, you're not going to be able to capitalize when the country shifts and the moods shift.
Well, I think that was actually poignantly made in that special election in Tennessee earlier this week, where we saw Democrats pick up double-digit points on where they were when Trump won the district. They still got kind of smoked, but I do wonder if you look at that result, that you also look at the results that we saw in the governor's race in New York, the election in Virginia, all of these things, and you wonder if the Republican Party isn't maybe losing a little steam ahead of the midterms.
It's always a challenge the first midterm after a president is inaugurated, and that's what we're headed into. It is not going to be an easy election for Republicans around the country. Here in Charleston, I think we'll do well. I think we'll do well in South Carolina. But the numbers and just it has been a long time since a party has picked up seats right after electing a president. So that's just the nature of the electorate year after year. And it will be a challenge to hold the House. I think we'll do better in the Senate nationally. But
yeah,
we're aware and fighting. So
yeah, I mean, that's kind of just political science 101. You always lose seats in the midterms, or usually anyways. And sometimes the best you can do is just hope for maintaining what you have. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But in the midterms, we're also looking at that governor's race. We mentioned Representative Ralph Norman, but we've got, again, 3 or 4 heavy hitters looking to replace Governor McMaster. And we've seen the race get a little messy already and early as well. What's your take? How are things going in the governor's race?
I think it's a fascinating race because you have 4 candidates who are sort of the top tier of candidates. What I appreciate the most about all 4 of them is they've come to Charleston. Obviously, Nancy Mace is from Charleston and represents Charleston. But Ralph Norman has spent some time here. I've had a chance to sit down and talk with him for an extended period of time. The Lieutenant Governor, PALMETTO, has been here quite a bit, and every time she's here, her crowd seems to grow. She's made some great inroads. And of course, Attorney General Alan Wilson is there whenever we need him. He worked hard to make sure Carl Ritchie got elected sheriff. He was actually in town just yesterday. And, all of these candidates, if I need something and I need help with something in Charleston, or I think there's a group that they need to talk to, they answer the phone, which means that they care about the Low Country. They care about making sure that even though they might be from the upstate, we're a part of the picture moving forward. And I think that's essential. And of course, that's balanced by Nancy Mace representing the Low Country.
Yeah, I think that Charleston probably has an important role to play in any statewide election. Just from your perspective, how important is Charleston? Is it the battleground for the governor's race, or is there somewhere else that we should be looking at that is really going to tell you where things are going?
Greenville, Spartanburg,
right?
They tend to take up a huge chunk of the electorate in a Republican primary specifically. But what's interesting about the Low Country is 2 things. The first is, you have 3 candidates who don't have a geographic base here and one who does. You also have thousands and tens of thousands of folks who are going to vote in June and have gotten here in the last 5 years. They don't know the history. They don't know the personalities. They don't know, what, the 2010 gubernatorial race and how that all played out and Nikki Haley coming from. They don't know that history. They don't know necessarily who's who. But they're going to vote. And if you're not talking to transplants, people who just became more political in the past, 5 or 6 years, younger voters, and especially, the Charleston suburbs and, the retirement areas, you can't win this race unless you are reaching out to them and connecting with them. And they're hard to get to because they're not on everyone's radar screen the same way someone who's been here for their entire lives.
I mean, do you think that those transplants care about different issues than locals? How do you message to them?
I'll tell you what, we have a T-shirt. I got to put it online. It's a great stocking stuffer. And it says, for the county party, it says, conservative refugee from a failed blue state. And that says Charleston Republicans. And the reason we did that is because some of the majority of folks who are coming into Charleston, a slight majority of transplants, are actually Republican voters. We get a little bit more red anytime someone moves here from a failed blue state. We're going to see more and more coming from New York. We've got people from New Jersey. And frankly, sometimes they're more conservative than the folks who grew up here because they've seen the other side. They've seen how bad it can get.
Yeah.
And, we lean into that as a county party. We reach out to them. We want them to get involved because, frankly, they know the other side of the story.
Well, I want to ask you, Bill, about the most recent polling. We saw Alan Wilson go up, Nancy Mace go down to like 10%. I have some concerns about the actual poll itself. I'm curious what you make of the poll, but also whether or not we should be paying attention to these polls at this point right now.
Should be paying attention, but a lot of it's still about name ID. No one's really started talking about the issues. These things change. You have candidates going up and down constantly. You've got candidates who haven't really even started to advertise or get into the mix. So primarily it's about name ID. And once all the candidates are up with their ads and their mail and doing major events, then we'll start to see really where the polls are headed. The voters will start paying more attention, right? One of the things I saw in that poll is the number of people who didn't know or were unsure in terms of favorability. Right? They don't know. We do because we pay attention to this every day, but whenever I'm talking to a new local candidate, someone who's never run for office before, is going to run for state legislature or county council, I always say, go knock on your next door neighbor's door and ask them who their state senator is. Right? We pay attention to it, but people who are going to be voting in June don't. They'll start paying more attention as we get through the spring, as the advertising heats up, as the press coverage heats up. But right now, the people paying the closest attention are the people who are mostly influencing the polls.
But do you see it, to see Nancy Mace go from the 20s down to the 10s in the course of a month and a half, is that surprising even if you don't trust the poll?
Nothing surprises me when it comes to Nancy Mace. She has defied the odds at every turn. She is, I like to say she's always been a maverick. She is the opposite of a go-along to get-along candidate. And if anyone thinks that this is sort of the death knell to Nancy Mace, they haven't watched her career over the past few years.
I mean, she says she's a fighter. I do believe that for sure. I mean, even if she were at 1%, I think you still count her among the contenders for governor, just because, as you've said, she's done it before.
She's done it before.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to watch Nancy Mace navigate all of these things.
I mean, she's fearless, and she says what she thinks, and frankly, in a lot of ways, that's refreshing in a candidate. You're not going to get the canned sound bites from Nancy Mace.
In the last week, we've seen all sorts of party division in terms of what happened with the Epstein list. We've seen the president breaking with several Republicans. We've seen Nancy Mace's campaign advisor drop her because apparently she's on board with Rand Paul or something. I just wonder if it's difficult right now to be a Republican in a party where you might have disagreements with President Donald Trump.
If we didn't have disagreements, we wouldn't be a very good party. And I like to think, I've been doing this for 30 years professionally. I've seen issues come and go, candidates come and go, the next big thing come and go. I've seen some of the most brutal fights you can imagine, significantly worse than that are going on right now. And I like to remind people that this too shall pass. We've been through it before. It's usually been worse. And our job as a party is to sort of keep it all together and remember that in June, we're coming together behind our nominees. I mean, you think about where Donald Trump came from. He came down the escalator in 2015, and he was on the outside looking in. His issue set didn't match the field that he was in, but he changed the party. He changed the electorate. And he's really redefined a lot of what it means to be a Republican. In 2028, we're going to have another presidential primary. That, of course, in South Carolina, being the first in the South, that could be interesting here. And at a local level, we're doing the same thing. What does the party stand for? What do the voters in a Republican primary want their nominee to be standing for? That changes all the time.
South Carolina obviously plays a big role in the next presidential election. You've already mentioned it. Who do you think we're going to see? I mean, you guys have brought in people to talk to at various times. We saw Kristi Noem here a couple weeks ago as well. which she was actually the governor of my home state before she was the head of the Department of Homeland Security. But who's going to be on the ballot?
Oh, my goodness. I think you'll probably have 8 to 10 very strong candidates.
Yeah.
Obviously, J.D. Vance comes in as the leader in the clubhouse, simply sitting on the vice presidency.
Yeah.
But we've seen extremely strong challenge to incumbent vice presidents before. We've seen some of them lose. And I think, and you know, we're already starting to hear rumblings. We're already getting phone calls and visits and people sort of dipping their toe in the water. I'm originally from New Hampshire, so I pay attention to this stuff just because that's how I grew up. And there will be a lot of interesting names, big names, and I think there's going to be an extremely vibrant discussion about what the national party stands for in the years after President Trump.
Do you think that there's a possibility that somehow President Trump tries to run again?
Barring a constitutional amendment, which could never get done in time, there's no way it could happen. And I think President Trump is having a blast sort of trolling the media saying, oh, in my third term, and everyone goes a little crazy. The fun thing about President Trump is he does that all the time.
Yeah.
And he sort of throws out a little bit of, a crazy statement that he knows are going to get people fired up, and everyone gets fired up. And meanwhile, he sort of goes along getting things done behind the scenes. It's almost like a diversion tactic, and he knows that the Democrats are going to bite every single time.
Yeah. Let's track back for just a moment because I brought up Rand Paul. I want to go back to him because, he's one of the few Republicans right now that is showing expressed concern about some of the president's actions. It seems to me that President Trump is pushing the bounds of the presidency to see what he can do, and Congress has the obligation to rein him in if they want to. And I think specifically about like the strikes on drug boats or alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and now in the Pacific. Is anything that he's doing in terms of expanding power of the executive branch raise concerns or should raise concerns for you or for conservatives? Or do we just trust that it's probably fine?
What President Trump is doing extremely well, and I think it's very important for the country, is he's making sure that the executive branch is accountable to the American people. For a long time, we've had bureaucrats and department heads and so-called experts literally writing law. Now they call it setting regulations, but they're writing laws because a law is something, frankly, you can get fined or thrown in jail if you cross it. And you have, some deputy director of the EPA over the years who's saying, okay, well, now this emission standard is, well, I didn't vote for that guy, right? And they've done it under Republican presidents as well. We have had a rogue bureaucracy. I get to vote for the President of the United States. The bureaucracy, the executive branch of government, answers to the President of the United States. And President Trump has done a phenomenal job reining that in. Frankly, I'd like to see Congress step up and take back a lot of their powers and get into the business once again of actually writing laws. Too many things arise because Congress will write this nebulous law and say, well, this department will set the rules on it. No. We elected you to write laws. You set the rules. You set the standards. Put it in writing, because otherwise it's going to be to the whims of the bureaucracy. What Trump has done fantastically well is rein that in and say, wait a second. I'm the president. I answer to the people. You answer to me, because nobody voted for the deputy director of the EPA.
Sure. But, Congress does have the, Constitution on its side saying before the president does certain things, Congress has to approve.
Yeah.
Especially when we're in wartime, which people always talk about a war on drugs, a war on terror, a war on whatever. And now we've got alleged drug boats being bombed without evidence that they're carrying drugs, and people being killed. I think the number's up to almost 90 people killed. And I just wonder, where is the congressional approval? And is this not something that should require congressional approval?
Well, I think Congress is going to be having those conversations in the next coming days and weeks.
Yeah.
We're also seeing a lot of the early reporting on that was, bunk. And frankly, a lot of it has to do with this is the first time that we've had the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense being willing to, hey, you want to see the video of what we're doing? I think there's been a lot of stuff that's happened over the decades that hasn't been on video, especially with the war on drugs. I think the transparency is good. I think the conversations that we're about to have will be good. And I think, we will find out where the constitutional limits are. If there needs to be an additional authorization for the use of military force, where the War Powers Act comes in, all of these things are going to be discussed. But we have a transparency. We have, this is what I'm going to do. Look, I just did it. The president has the power as commander-in-chief to, conduct kinetic actions. Congress has the power of the purse, and we have the War Powers Resolution as a way to sort of work that through as we go.
Sure. No, you bring up a great point. I actually had the same realization this morning when I was looking at some of this reporting. I thought to myself, I wonder how often there is a military action that we, A, don't know about, and B, certainly don't have video of. So in some regards, you're absolutely right that the transparency there is
President Obama
something.
droned American citizens, right, in the Middle East. I mean, he took out, and they were, terrorists, but they were American citizens working with a terror cell, okay? Well, where's the accountability for that as well? Frankly, legal questions aside, that's a bad guy. He wanted to, kill Americans. Okay. But it's the same conversation. The people driving those boats off Venezuela are bad guys who are going to hurt Americans. And I think it's important that, we have the conversations, but these are not, innocent victims here. We know that they're drug smugglers. We know the death toll that these narcotics take in the United States. So it's an interesting conversation. It's an important conversation. We got to remember, we're trying to protect Americans.
Well, hopefully we'll see more of the evidence that is driving these military actions, and in the coming weeks see what Congress has to say if they say anything at all. But let's get really controversial for a minute, because I've got two really controversial questions for you. One of them submitted by one of our producers here. But big weekend in sports. Are you watching football this weekend?
Yes.
What are we watching?
I was at the Clemson Carolina game last week. My daughter is at Clemson, and so we went and sat in the Clemson side, and it was a lot of fun. My apologies. Please don't vote Democrat if you're a Carolina fan and I've just offended you. My wife is from Ohio, so we'll be watching the Buckeyes play. And, I gotta thank, I got a business partner from Indiana, so Ohio State, Indiana is going to be fun. I wish it meant more.
It's going to be a good game, though.
It's going to be a great game. Every time I watch Indiana, it's, like, this is real. And I got to pull for Georgia over Bama. I mean,
Come on.
I've had enough Alabama.
Listen, the sentiment is fair. My family is Alabama fans. My father's family comes from Alabama, so I am an Alabama fan, and I am extremely nervous for Georgia. But I'm also really excited for that Ohio game. Can't stand Ohio personally, but man, those two teams, it's going to be
hard not to sort of pull for the underdog in that.
I know, right?
I hope my wife doesn't see this just because she'll be upset. And for me, I grew up in the Northeast where, I always say to my friends back north, they say, what's the South like? And I say, well, they're vaguely aware that sometimes people play football on Sundays, right?
It's so true.
In the Northeast, it's the exact opposite. So I am enjoying this year more than anything the 10 straight wins of the New England Patriots, and somebody's going to take a shot at me on that one too, because there's nothing more annoying than a Patriots fan.
Yeah, so. For sure. No, it should be really good. And I'm really, I don't even know how much the games matter so much in terms of playoff potential, but hopefully all of the teams that are playing in these big championship games make it. I think they should, but we'll
and
see
it gives
how,
us something to argue about. We get through this weekend, and we're going to talk about the seedings and who get left out, and who, it's fun. That's what makes college football great.
Okay, the other question the producer wanted me to ask you, and you don't have to answer this, but one thing that sometimes we'll ask people is if they have any fun conspiracy theories. Any fun conspiracy theories on your end?
That's a great question. Not really. It's funny. If you're on the inside, there's a great saying in politics is that people get into politics because they hope it's going to be like the West Wing. They fear it's going to be like
Veep or something?
No, they fear it's going to be like the one with Kevin Spacey.
Oh, yeah.
And they find out it's like Veep.
I love Veep, though.
That's the most accurate portrayal of the reality of politics, where it's sort of hang on for dear life.
Yeah.
A lot of these things that people look at politics and say, there's a conspiracy. The folks in charge of this aren't smart enough to pull together. And they're often drinking from the fire hose on what happened today and who said what. The grand conspiracies are usually, easily disproven by, I don't know anyone involved who could pull that off.
Yeah.
There's at the higher levels, especially, it is a lot like Veep. And, conspiracies are fun.
Right. I can't live in a world where there's a bunch of conspiracies going. I've got, we all have so much going on in our lives. Like, I can't stop to worry about, whether or not we really landed on the moon. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to, I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid on that one.
Some of my closest friends and family are diehard Democrats, which is fun.
Yeah.
And I have heard from them fascinating conspiracy theories that I know firsthand. I'm like, no, that didn't happen that way. I was in the room.
Right.
It was more, jumbled incompetence than it, or whatever it is. So, usually conspiracy theories are disproven by sheer incompetence.
I just don't think that most people, certainly because there's all sorts of, it's probably not a conspiracy theory, but there's a lot of people that allege bias in news, and there is some of that for sure. But when people say things like, you're pushing an agenda or something, I don't have the time or energy to even come up with an agenda when I'm just trying to turn out a story. And that's how I feel about most conspiracies. Like, who has the time and energy to
the most important
do these
thing
things?
Anyone in the news media is to constantly be looking to expand their sphere of who they're talking to.
Right.
Because local media is very different because we're all in the same community. And, I see one of the a local reporter, I see him at the grocery store, right? But in the national media, I think there's too much cocooning. There's too much of an echo chamber.
Yeah.
These are folks, we've got 20-something and 30-something reporters at the national level who don't know anything other than the prep school they went to, the Columbia School of Journalism, and the first newsroom they walked into. Reporters used to be kind of a blue-collar job. You were part of the community. You were somebody who could write well or report well. And you had friends who were farmers and factory workers.
Yeah.
And a lot of the tone you see, especially from the national media, it's almost, the best quote I saw is like when national media reports on conservatives, it's like someone going to a zoo and reporting on a group of animals. They have no frame of reference. They've never met them. As a conservative, we see that. My first campaign was 1996, so this is 30 years in the business. And 30 years ago and 20 years ago, the most important people to know in a campaign in the media were the political reporters at the newspaper, the assignment editors at the TV stations, who was doing the Sunday shows, the policy shows like this, in that media market. That shifted over the last, say, 10 years, where it's much more valuable in the minds of a consultant or a candidate to know someone who's in the booking department at Fox News for a congressional race than it is to have someone, tied to the local media landscape. And I think if there's one thing that I wish we could sort of pull back and revert to the norm is people paying more attention to the local media outlets. watching the local news every evening the way I grew up, reading the local paper, instead of just flipping it on, to watch Fox News or, MS Now, or whatever it's called, or CNN. The issues that affect our lives are decided here at the local level.
Right.
The taxes, the schools, the roads. And our society has now become such that we're consuming national news and thinking that's more important than who we elect to school board, city council, state legislature.
And I think that, when you have local interviews with local reporters or local candidates, the conversations are less heated in a lot of ways, partially because, we're going to continue to come and ask you for interviews regardless of because you're our rep or whatever. Whereas, if you go to a big national outlet, they're looking for somebody that is going to provide a certain level of entertainment value because they're good interviews. But I think you're right. And of course, I'm going to advocate for local media.
Yes, it's critical.
But I do think that you get more pleasant conversations when you sit down with
and
local
same,
folks.
Honestly, the same goes for social media. I see people posting stuff on social media. I try not to post, really partisan things on my own social media because I'm from a giant, diverse family.
Right.
And my family is more important to me than almost anything else. And there are political conversations to be had, but there are relationships that are more important than anything else.
Right.
And when people get onto social media, often they forget that that's there for the world. And frankly, usually that's almost counterproductive. Because if it's coming from the left towards the right or the right towards the left, it pushes us back into a defensive crouch.
Yeah.
And then we want to push back, which means it's not convincing us of anything.
It's not collaborative at all. It doesn't open the door for a
So
conversation.
I always advocate, I want people to sort of, hey, think about, is your friend who lives down the block who is on the other side of the aisle, what are they going to think when they read this? How's that going to affect your relationship? And more importantly, if it's something you care about, is this going to have any chance of convincing them and having them change their mind?
Sure.
And so, maybe it's one person at a time, probably a losing effort, but it's important for our country.
Yeah, an important effort for sure. Let's wrap this up, though. Sure. What hopes do you have for 2026, either politically or not politically?
Sure. I'd like to continue to see the Republican Party grow. We do things called neighborhood meetups where we go to a bar. The party goes to a bar. We advertise it. We go to a bar and we say, come and meet your fellow Republicans. And it's our way of sort of just reaching folks who have never been involved. We're going to continue to do that in 2026, especially in the spring when we build the party. We're going to add new voters to our rolls. I'd like to go after some of the Charleston Democrat-held state legislative seats. I want to make sure that we win some county council seats. It's not going to be the big fight, local fight that we had last year over the county-wide, elected officials. But we have the governor's race and SC1 to keep us busy. So keep the peace in the primaries, have great nominees, take out some Democrats in the fall.
All right. Well, that's a tagline right there for you. Certainly exciting stuff happening in the next 6 months, honestly. And hopefully we will all be here for that exciting ride. Andrew Boucher, chairman of the Charleston GOP. Thank you.
Thank you so much.